Now, with Mr. Phil Goff, leader of the Labour Party. Good morning to you, Phil.
Good morning, Wammo. How are things there in Auckland?
Well, certainly much better than
down here.
That's correct. Yeah, tell us about your last, almost week in Christchurch now.
Well, I did get back to Auckland briefly. I looked a bit silly wandering around in this increasingly dust-covered suit, so I went home for a shower and get a change of clothes. But the last 48 hours just really spent helping out people on the ground. I'm staying with a colleague, Clayton Cosgrove, who's MP for Waimakariri. And Clayton's area's in the north of Christchurch in the west, and it's not as badly damaged as the east, which is still in a pretty dismal situation out in Brighton and Naranui and places like that. They're low-income areas anyway, but people there are without water still, without power, without sewerage. Shops aren't open because there is no power. And what Clayton and a group of people up here in Rangiora have been doing is setting up a food convoy, basically helicoptering and trucking food that's being donated down to, and then the people down in Brighton, working out of the new Brighton police station, are distributing it around in the streets. And it's fantastic. I mean, I've worked at both ends of the food chain, and just people giving freely of their time, enthusiastically, and then getting out and giving it, helping people out there, turning up on somebody's door with a hot meal when they haven't had a hot meal for days, and particularly, the ones that I feel very sorry for, those elderly folk on their own, often women, and as much as anything, they need a bit of a cuddle and a bit of reassurance. Give them a hot meal, give them some bottled water and some food parcel. So it's little things like that really can make a difference in people's lives, and great job being done.
I wonder at what point, though, does that volunteer workforce that is providing those meals, what point does that turn into some kind of government-paid workforce to actually make the meals, deliver them, do that kind of thing?
Well, I suppose one of the interesting things is that people didn't wait to be told what they needed to do to help. It's a sad life if we live in a country where when something goes wrong, everybody says, oh, well, we'll wait and see what the government does about it. Now, the government's got a huge role to play, but don't underestimate the initiative of people to say, bugger it, we'll get off our bum and we'll do something ourselves because it needs to be done. And I've seen that in so many ways, so many groups out there, and the Sally Army, the Red Cross, the church groups, the community groups. They're all doing it, and what you need then is the government to come in behind and give the support, the logistic assistance, and then there are bigger packages that government will have to work on, which I guess they'll announce today, which might involve, wage subsidies, etc.
Well, let's talk about that, because while the search and rescue effort is still going on, some attention is turning to, well, how is the country going to fund the recovery effort there in Christchurch?
Well, yeah, it's there's some big questions there, and an equally big question, what do we do in Christchurch when two-thirds of the central city area will probably have to be rebuilt? You're not talking about patching an odd building or demolishing an odd building. You're talking about replacing two-thirds of it. The first thing is, there has to be support from outside financially to stop the natural disaster becoming an economic disaster for Christchurch. People have lost their livelihoods, their businesses. The city needs massive amounts of support. And where does that come from? Well, Earthquake Commission, they've got $6 billion, but I guess that will be swallowed up pretty quickly. There's reinsurance, so there'll be billions of dollars that come in from insurance companies overseas, and your worry would be, will they start to balk at reinsuring yet again after effectively the third significant earthquake? And you hope that they will do the responsible thing. And then government has to look at how they're going to do it. I see the Prime Minister talking about lifting the Earthquake Commission levy. Well, that may be something that needs to be done. There's a question of whether there's an overall levy, as the Australians put on for the floods. Well, the government's doing the analysis of that. They've got the material there, and I'm not going to second-guess them. But I do hope that if there is a levy, that they take a leaf out of the Australians' book and say, there are some people in our community, people down here for a start, but also lower income people that are stretched to the limit now. And maybe this is the time when the folk who got hundreds of dollars a week in tax cuts and sometimes thousands of dollars a week in tax cuts have got to play their part and help out people that are really in desperate situations. So let's watch that space. Should
there be a discussion about the viability of rebuilding, particularly central Christchurch in its current location?
Oh, look, I think they can rebuild safely. There are buildings here that did withstand absolutely the earthquake, and there are newer buildings that some really serious questions will have to be asked about. Forsyth Bar, which is fairly new, I wouldn't think it was much more than 10 years old, a big glass tower, all of the internal staircases on both sides of the building collapsed. Now, there's a really serious question to ask about a modern building that does that. Why did CTV fail catastrophically? And I got to say, Wammo, I was down there yesterday too and talking to the police officer in charge of the scene, and it is a really sad place. They're removing the debris slowly, not so that they can find survivors, but so that they can find maybe minute amounts of forensic evidence of the, I think it's 86 people that are still thought to be on the site and who have died on the site. So they will rebuild Christchurch, but it needs to be done to the highest safety standards. And then you've got to say, is there an opportunity in this? Out of every tragedy, I guess there's an opportunity. In 1931, when Napier was destroyed, people at that point, 80 years ago, had the foresight to build a city in a style that has endured that period of time and that has made it world famous. Maybe we can do the same thing in Christchurch. And we really need some creativity to go into that thinking in due course.
And then out in the eastern suburbs, and I remember we had this conversation last time after the September earthquake, and you wandered around there, about the viability of rebuilding suburbs on land that is obviously unsafe during any kind of seismic activity.
Well, the whole of Canterbury, I guess, is built on the debris that's come down from the Alps, and therefore huge areas subject to liquefaction. Some areas, I was walking down Avonside yesterday early in the morning, and you get that what they call, I think, lateral spread as the earthquake just shifts. You leave the huge splits in the ground, and it moves into the river, and the same with Kaiapoi. Look, I think they can do it. You can't abandon a region in a city for what might happen in the future, but the standards will need to be in place, and people will want that reassurance, and the style of the building might have to adapt to the nature of the geology there, But if you looked at every area of New Zealand, we're all our towns are built on floodplains. They're all susceptible to damage should there be an earthquake in that area. And I guess a lot of folk in Wellington, myself included when I'm there 3 days a week, will be looking around them and saying, well, something like this, if it happened in Wellington, we've got high earthquake standards in modern buildings, but the damage would be immense. And the nature of Wellington is that it's easily cut off. You lose the gorge and the road up to the hut and the airport. How do you get things into the city? So some big challenges in our thinking that we'll need to develop still further. Having said that, I think civil defence in New Zealand has, by international standards, worked pretty well. People were in place, doing the job, were pretty well organised.
Phil Goff, best of luck for your day ahead there in Christchurch, and thanks very much for joining us.
Okay, thanks, Wammo. Catch you next week.
Cheers. See you.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
Labour leader Phil Goff there with us this morning. Time now.